think it's Mr. Cully's turn for cross-examination. So step right up. Make sure you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Hager, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
And I enjoyed talking to you in the past, so I'm sad this is going to be a brief conversation, but I think we can get through this quickly. So just want to ask a couple questions here. This is all related to the minimum system. But first, as kind of a level setting, would you agree with me that average rate making, that is, basing rate making on the average customer, tends to gloss over individual differences in the cost of providing service?
Yes.
So there could be different load shapes. Customers have different load factors, different KW maximum demands they put on the system.
It's a necessary trade-off for, among other things, for simplicity in rate making.
Thank you. And is it precise or imprecise to say that high-use customers are subsidizing low-use customers if we don't know exactly what it costs to serve those groups? That is, let's assume we could look at them in a granular way and group low-usage customers together in some cohesive manner and high usage. So let me just back up and ask that again in a more simple way. Is it imprecise to say that high-use customers subsidize low-use customers if we haven't looked at the underlying question of what it costs to serve those groups?
While that can be true, I think the opposite can be true as well. It just inevitably there is some subsidization going on because of the fact that we make rates for classes of customers instead of individual customers.
Okay, thank you. And if we look back at, and you're familiar with the term, the basic customer method, I assume?
Yes.
And if we look at that and the BFC, the basic facilities charge, were based solely on the costs included in that, that would be the meters, service drop, and kind of the billing and kind of general customer support. Is that correct?
Yes.
And would you expect that there would be much variance? Let's just talk about residential customers here. Would you expect there would be much variance in the cost to serve just on those items for the residential class?
I want you to, if you don't mind, state the question again.
Sure. Maybe I can even state it a different way. Would you expect there to be a big variance in the cost of metering that's used for residential customers within the class?
Not within a rate class, I would think. Particularly for residential, it would tend to be fairly uniform.
Right. So individual customers paying a BFC that's set on those costs, you could say they're fairly well covering that element of the cost of service.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And would you agree with me that it's cheaper to serve, let's say it's a fourplex apartment that's all sharing service from a transformer? Would it be, if you broke them out separately and looked at them, is it cheaper to serve that fourplex than it is a 4,000 square foot single family home with a dedicated transformer?
Yes.
And would you agree generally that it's cheaper from a cost of service perspective to serve a dense urban area versus a kind of a sprawled out rural area?
I think that depends somewhat in terms of what's involved in getting service in a dense area. Sometimes you require underground, those sorts of things. But I think this just depends.
Okay, I'll see. And so in general, if we could agree that the basic facility charge, if it just captured the meter, the service drop, and those things, that would fairly well, every customer would be paying their share of those costs through a BFC. And again, I'll maybe make it clear, this is under the basic customer approach.
Right. I understand the question. I would say that generally that using the basic customer method, generally residential customers I think I'm going to back up on that. I can't say for sure.
Okay, well, and this is, I'll end here, is really where I want to go with this anyway, is, well, if the minimum system is meant to capture some portion of the distribution system, then you're trying to make sure that a customer is paying the minimal amount needed to move power from point A to point B. Would you agree with that?
No, I would say well, maybe I'd say it a little differently. I'd say that what they are paying for is the facilities that are necessary in the event that the customer, in the likely event that the customer will want to use power, whether or not they do or not.
Right, and as we discussed, there are different customer types all within the residential class that may each have unique cost of serve. Some might be cheaper, some might be bigger, but we're lumping them all together in average rate making. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so would you agree that if a customer has multiple meters, multiple accounts at a single premises, that they're paying for more than their share under the minimum system method?
I think it would depend on the circumstances. I'd say it's difficult to say. And as we've really discussed, the idea, there is a lot of averaging that goes on in rate making, and that includes using the minimum system concept and also for the customer-related costs that are allocated to customers, the service drops, et cetera. So while in some circumstances, regardless of the method used, there is some subsidization, cross-subsidization. What I think the concern is here is making sure that we are developing the cost of service in a way that does seek to recognize that a portion of the distribution system is there for the purpose of ensuring that when a customer flips the switch, the lights come on.
Okay, thank you. But you would agree that in moving to the minimum system method, we would not be eliminating all types of subsidies that occur because of the differences in cost to serve individual customers.
I think that's definitely true.
I have no more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson.
Let's see if I can do a little better with this mic today. Good afternoon, Ms. Hager.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Hager, you are the company's cost allocation witness, right?
Yes.
And so your testimony focuses on the company's cost of service study.
Yes.
And in its cost of service study, the company's classified a portion of distribution grid costs, part of the cost of poles, lines, transformers, and the like, as customer costs, right?
That's correct.
And to do that, you use something called the minimum system method, which is also known as the minimum size method.
That's correct.
And that using that method, the company basically imagines a hypothetical minimum size distribution system that would be built to serve the minimum load. As a non-engineer, would you is my sort of non-engineer...
You're the non-engineer here, right?
Is my non-engineer explanation roughly correct?
I would say, I'd probably say it a little differently than using the words imagine and things like that. But it's The idea is to seek to identify what the company really would have done if it had only been building the system to serve minimum load. And in fact, that's not what the company did. The company built assets to both serve the customer and to serve the load of customers. And I think that, so you do end up using some hypothetical information. Engineers don't like to think that they imagine things. They like to think they deduce things and reason things out.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean it in a pejorative way. I meant it in the sort of that it is a hypothetical rather than. And then you did anticipate and answer what was going to be my next question, which is that the company did size and build its actual distribution system to serve customer load. Right?
That's correct.
And
I will say both to serve customer load and to serve that customer, regardless of how much load they had.
And you cite the 1992 NARUC Electric Utility Cost Allocation Manual for the proposition that a portion of those distribution costs are customer related, right?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to put a little excerpt of the manual on the Elmo. Is it? I guess it's on. And just for the record, Ms. Hager, does this appear to be the cover page of the NARUC Electric Utility Cost Allocation Manual to which you were referring in your testimony?
Yes.
And if we turn to the preface, I'll put it up. Do you see there where I've highlighted where the NARUC manual states right there in the preface that one of the objectives of the manual was that the writing style should be non-judgmental, not advocating any one particular method, but trying to include all currently used methods with pros and cons. Do you see that?
I do.
And so will you agree with me that the NARUC manual does not advocate the use of any one particular method to classify distribution costs?
Well, I will agree that that is true. I would also note that the NARUC manual only named two methods. It did not name the basic customer method as a way of allocating all customer costs. The two methods it named both include a portion of the distribution system.
And those two methods to which you're referring were the minimum size, also known as minimum system method, and the minimum intercept method. Is that right?
Right, also known as the zero intercept method.
Okay, and you have anticipated my next illustrative document I'm going to put on the Elmo, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Let me know if folks can't hear me as I move back and forth to the Elmo. Now, what I have what I've placed on the Elmo is Mr. Barnes's surrebuttal exhibit JRB1, which has already been admitted into the record. And I apologize, I don't know what hearing exhibit this was, but Ms. Hager, have you had a chance to look at this document before?
No.
Okay. Well, please take a moment to familiar yourself with.
Well, I certainly can't familiarize myself with it from here.
Sure. Miss Thompson, as long as you're behind the mic, we can hear you. So when you get down there to move something on it, just don't talk. Wait till you get back up there. And that way we'll get it all. Unless you want a lavalier, we can put a lavalier on you.
That's okay. I'll leave that to Mr. Elliott.
Mr. Chairman, may I have a copy of the document that the witness is being asked to review, please?
We're getting you one right here.
Had this not already been admitted into the record, I would have, of course, brought extra copies, but I guess incorrectly presumed that folks would have a copy of it.
Does everybody have a copy that needs one?
And Ms. Hager, I'm not going to ask you a lot of detailed questions about the document. Have you had a moment to familiarize yourself with it?
Just generally, but yes.
And so, Ms. Hager, just following up on your response a moment ago that the NARUC 1992 cost allocation manual had included only two methods of classifying distribution system costs, minimum size and zero intercept. I'll represent to you that this is a letter from the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. Do you recognize it as such?
Yes.
Having had a moment to look it over. And I will direct you to that first paragraph, and I'm realizing I can't actually read that, and I can't be heard if I look at this one, but then I can't read that myself. But it is a letter from the Washington Utilities Commission to the authors of the NARUC manual. Are you with me there?
I don't know the person that's named as the addressee, but I'll take your word for that.
And if you will follow down with me where it says at pages 91 to 100 of the draft, the minimum system and zero intercept methods are presented. Do you see that where it's highlighted?
I do.
And it says these are the two methods our commission has explicitly rejected. Do you see that?
I do.
And then on the second page of the letter, the commission points out that our commission has been extremely clear about one thing in this area, that the minimum distribution and minimum intercept methods are not acceptable, and that the only costs which should be considered customer related are the costs of meter services, meter reading, and billing. Our staff believes that is the most common approach taken by commissions around the country. For example, in Iowa, the administrative rules of the commission set this forth explicitly, while in Arizona and Illinois, the commissions have explicitly rejected the minimum system or minimum intercept methods in favor of the basic customer approach. Now, I'm not asking you to agree with that. I'm just asking you, do you accept that this was a letter from a commission addressing a what the author saw as a deficiency in the NARUC manual in terms of its comprehensiveness?
I
Mr. Chairman, we'll stipulate that this letter says what it says, and apparently was written by the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission, the NARUC. It is what it is. I'm not.
Yeah, they weren't picking you up in the. Say that again, Mr. Anthony, so it'll come over live stream.
DEC will stipulate that this letter says what it says, and it appears to be a letter from the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission to a person whose address is at the California PUC, but it appears to be discussing the NARUC Cost of Service Manual. We'll stipulate to all of that as a document speaking for itself.
Yes,
That's
thank you,
fine.
Mr. Chairman.
That's fine.
And I agree the document does speak for itself. Now, Ms. Hager, you say the minimum system approach is consistent with longstanding history, the company's longstanding history in North Carolina, do you not?
I do.
And you were here for the testimony of Mr. Gartitego on March 21st.
Yes.
Mr. Gartitego testified that the minimum system method has been approved by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. You recall that?
I don't recall his exact language on that.
Now, Mr. Garditego's Duke's South Carolina president, correct?
That's correct.
So he may not be as familiar as you and I, having not lived those North Carolina Utilities Commission rate cases quite as closely as you and I may have. He may not be as familiar with what happened in those cases. Is that correct?
That is correct. What I would say is that the North Carolina Commission approved a basic facilities charge that was based on the cost of service, using minimum system as in the cost of service study.
Well, you have anticipated several of my questions, so
Trying to move us along.
Let's
yes.
walk through that. Now, the North Carolina Commission, as you said, accepts the company's use of minimum system for allocating costs to the various customer classes, right?
That's my recollection, yes.
Now, in the most recent Duke Carolina's rate case, which was docket number E7 sub 1146 in the North Carolina Utilities Commission, the company's cost of service study using minimum system estimated a theoretical customer cost of $23.78. Does that sound right? Subject to check?
It sounds like it's in the ballpark, yes.
And the North Carolina Commission approved an increase in the BFC from $11.80 to $14.
We'll take that subject to check.
And that $14 was the same BFC level that had been stipulated to by the North Carolina public staff in the the prior Duke rate case, which was the progress rate case, correct?
I'm sorry, I just don't recall that. But I think you're making an important distinction here that cost of service and rate design and where rates are ultimately set are separate processes. And I believe it's very important for us to get the cost of service right based on cost causation. And then if the company wants to offer and the ORS wants to offer and the commission wants to approve and however that wants to happen, some variations on how you move to rate design that will consider things such as impact on low income, those sorts of things, that the appropriate place for that move away from pure cost of service should take place. But I just do think it's very important that we understand the pure cost of what I think of as the pure cost of service before you move to that step of rate design and you decide what basic facilities charge, for example, to set.
And thank you. And I did I missed testifying yesterday with Mr. Piro, and we
Yes.
did talk a little bit about the fact that that there's not kind of a pure translation directly from the cost of service to the rate design, and that there is a kind of an art to rate design, as you suggest.
Absolutely.
Now, but going back to what the North Carolina Commission did and did not do, the North Carolina Commission, in approving the company's cost of service study, also did direct the public staff to undertake a study of the minimum system method, did it not?
That's correct.
And also, that order, the North Carolina Utilities Commission's order, has been appealed by several parties, including the Attorney General, the public staff, and my clients in that case. Isn't that right?
I had lost track of that, but
I will represent to you that it has. Would it surprise you that the basic facilities charge is one of the issues that has been appealed to the North Carolina Supreme Court from that order?
I'd have no basis to be surprised or not surprised about that.
Now, you say that the minimum system method is used by utilities in other states.
I do.
Let's talk about some other states. In Illinois, Back in 2006, the Commission refused to order Ameren to use the minimum system approach in its cost of service study in the next rate case.
I have no knowledge of that.
So when you say minimum systems used in other states, you were not referring to Illinois.
No.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that the Commission take judicial notice of the Illinois Commission's November 21, 2006 order in docket number 06-0072.
Okay, that's fine.
Now, Ms. Hager, in Florida, the Public Service Commission confirmed its prior rejection of the minimum system method in a Florida Power and Light case, rate case in 2010. So, are you aware of that?
I had understood that Florida has not allowed it in the past, but I think it has allowed for Gulf Power, which is one of the utilities in Florida, either zero intercept or zero intercept and minimum system combination. And it also approved a zero intercept method a few years earlier in 2002 for Chelco.
So you're using you're using the term. Now, zero intercept and minimum system are not the same thing, correct?
They are not the same thing, but I think the important point about that is that both would say a portion of the distribution system is appropriately allocated as customer cost. And so to me, a commission that approves zero intercept or a commission that approves minimum system, both are making the same statement that they are agreeing with that general concept. And that's why I've looked at them together.
Let's look at a different state then. Michigan, the Michigan Public Service Commission has rejected DTE's use of minimum system in a 2015 order. Are you familiar with that?
No, not specifically.
And DTE tried again in its next rate case, and again the Michigan PSC rejected the minimum system approach. You were not talking about Michigan when you talked about the other states where minimum system is used.
No, I wasn't.
Mr. Chairman, I'd request that the Commission take judicial notice of the Michigan Public Service Commission's December 11th, 2015 order in case number U-17767 and its January 31st, 2017 order in case number U-18014.
Okay, we will take judicial notice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, moving back closer to home, in using the minimum system method in this case, the company is breaking with its prior practice in South Carolina. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I think that's a natural question that this commission would want to understand the answer to.
In fact, the company hasn't used the minimum system method since 1991 when this commission told DEC's predecessor, Duke Power, to stop using that approach, right?
My understanding was, and we can look at that order if we need to, but that it did not allow it to be used in that case. Now, DEC didn't have another rate case for 17 years, I believe. It has had a number of cases since then. Duke Energy Carolinas has not proposed using minimum system in the cases up until now. And I think I explained somewhat about the reason for that in my direct testimony or my rebuttal testimony. But the bottom line is that it wasn't the fact that Duke Energy Carolinas didn't believe that was the most appropriate method to do cost of service. It was that it was taking as a given that had been the most recent commission order on that issue. But as the company has grown more and more concerned about this cross-subsidization, particularly when you look at the issue of incenting or the incentives that are there for rooftop solar, and the concern with giving an erroneous price signal to those customers about what costs that they will save that it assumed that the company avoids when those decisions are made. And I think as we've seen just the growth particularly in the rooftop solar installations in this state, it had grown to such a concern that the company felt like this was the appropriate time to move to the minimum system, consistent with how it has done cost of service in the North Carolina jurisdictions, and as I have mentioned, is done in many other states.
So going back to the Commission's 1991 order, the Commission, since you pivoted a little bit from my question, the Commission did find that the minimum system concept should be eliminated from Duke's cost of service study, right?
Well, that is true. It's not clear to me that there was no word forever. I certainly think we did not. There was nothing that said we could never propose it again, and I think that's this is the opportunity that we have taken to bring that back to this Commission for a ruling.
And so in this case, you're asking the Commission to depart from its longstanding prior precedent, rejecting use of that method, and you say that is because of this concern about intra-class subsidization, right?
Well, the first thing I'd say is even the long-standing tradition, I would say if you look before this order, minimum system had been used by utilities in South Carolina for many years, as far back as I could see. There was the one order in 1991 that both DEP and DEC did not choose to offer another option on cost of service up until these cases. So the long-standing is it certainly was I look at it as one order that made that decision, and the record that I saw on it was pretty brief, and I think there were probably a lot of issues in that case, other issues in that case, that this was simply one of those issues.
Well, and you'd agree with me that in any rate case, there are many, many issues, and this issue that we're talking about now is an important issue, but it's just one of many.
Absolutely.
Now, you sort of seized upon my characterization of that order as longstanding, but what I was really trying to ask you about was this notion that there's this intra-class subsidization going on, that it's a problem. That assertion presumes that the Commission accepts the company's minimum system, use of the minimum system method in its cost of service study, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hager. That's all I have. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Okay, as I recall, we didn't have any other cross, even ORS. Okay. So, commissioners. Okay.
She knows I'm not going to let her
It
get out of here
didn't.
without asking her.
Your light didn't come on, Commissioner
Sorry about
Belcher.
that.
That's why I was just almost joyous in anticipation.
Sorry to burst your bubble.
That's okay.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hager. It's good to see you again.
Well, it's nice to be seen.
Kind of like old times.
It
isn't
is, it is. We've rounded up the usual suspects, haven't we?
Well, some of them are missing.
And some of them are in different roles.
That's true.
I think there's a song with all of that in it, too.
This goes back to when I was on staff years ago, so when she used to come and testify a good bit. In Duke performing the cost of service study, did you participate in performing the cost of service study, or did you review it?
I reviewed it and most particularly reviewed the methodology. I did not tick and tie the numbers. But what I am offering, the opinion on is the methodology that was used and my review of the study.
Okay, and I note on page 14 of your direct testimony on line 4, you state DE Carolinas incorporated the concept of minimum system into its COS, cost of service study, for allocating cost.
That's correct.
how does that differ from using the minimum system cost of service study method?
The only thing I would say, I didn't mean anything special by those words, but I will say that there are different ways to go about performing the minimum system study. The NARUC cost allocation manual lays out the very general outlines of how to do it, but there are some slight variations on that. In some cases, some utilities have more data available than others to do it one way or the other. But it is really, all I mean there is to use the method.
Let's see. On page 15, let's see, what line? You were discussing switching from the previous method that you call the basic customer method to this minimum system method. In changing the cost of service studies, what considerations were taken into account as far as why change?
I was not the final decision maker on that. I was consulted about it, and I wasn't at a discussion about it. What I offered is probably the best I can do here, and that was that I felt like it was more accurate in terms of truly capturing cost causation. I think another advantage of it is that it it's consistent with how North Carolina is done. And while we're not saying this commission needs to do it because North Carolina did it, we all know that when you allocate costs, the more consistent you can be across jurisdictions, the less opportunities for costs to fall between the cracks or be double recovered. Those were probably the main two things that I recall discussing.
I don't mean to cross wires here, and I appreciate your comments earlier saying that the cost of service study, and correct me if I misstate or mischaracterize what you testified to, but that the cost of service study is the mechanism to determine the cost of serving the various classes of customers. But then rate design is a separate animal that you look at, but they are two distinct.
Well, they are distinct. Certainly, cost of service has to inform rate design.
Right.
And it really becomes the starting point. And to me, then any variations that go from there should be done thoughtfully and for a purpose, some other purpose such as policy, avoiding rate shock, those sorts of things. So,
and where I was going with that and appreciating your comments is, do you know how customer impacts may have come into the discussion of switching rate design? Switching cost of service methodology.
I don't recall it being discussed, but I think that would have been more in the discussion of rate design as opposed to cost of service.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The minimum system method which you used and the zero intercept method, did you compare the two?
The company did not compare the two. The company, as far as I know, has never done a zero intercept method study. It's a more complex method that involves regression analysis. And the company has not done it. It's my understanding, as we've gone into this case, we looked to see if that was something even the company could do and determined we didn't have the data to do it. But I do think that the minimum system method is one that the company is comfortable with the logic of it, and that the company believes, and I believe, is a reasonable and appropriate method.
What are other disadvantages of the zero intercept method except complexity?
I think it requires more data. This kind of goes to the complexity issue. It's probably more difficult to explain.
The commissioners.
Didn't say that. Although that would minimum
You're
system is
correct in
hard
that
enough.
assumption, Mark.
Minimum system is hard enough to explain. So, but those are the main things. There's nothing against the minimum intercept method. It's just what the company has done, as far as I can tell, as far back as I could see, was minimum system method.
Thanks very much. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Any redirect? No, sir. Okay. Ms. Hager, thank you very much for your testimony, and you may step down and you may be excused. Okay. We got next witness. Ma'am, please get it. While we're getting ready for the next witness, I know most of y'all have only been in here for 45 minutes, but I've been in here since 2 o'clock, so we're going to take a short break.